Hello, my name's Jane Wild and I am with you here to share some thoughts on the 22nd of February. This date has been in our heads for a week or two now as the date in which we will hear instruction, suggestions, a set of information about the way forward, about what will happen as we try to come as a country out of lockdown. Sometimes it is hard to see the way forward, isn't it? Sometimes we cannot see further than the end of our nose. And I am sure there are people who are trying to make decisions at the moment who are in that situation. As we think about not necessarily what those decisions will be, but our own personal spirituality in Lent, it is sometimes hard to see how God is working and where his working interacts with ours in the world. That turned my mind to Habakkuk. Habakkuk is a prophet in the Old Testament. He is somebody who is not afraid of asking God questions. This is one of the questions that he asks God. How long, O Lord, must I cry for help, but you do not listen? I call out to you, violence, but you don't deliver. Why do you force me to witness injustice? Why do you put up with wrongdoing? Destruction and violence confront me. Conflict is present, and one must endure strife. He really is having a go at God, isn't he? Really is asking where God is in his situation. And then perhaps for some of us, that might also be the case. God, why are you letting this happen in our world? God, how am I going to survive? Everybody else is doing so much better. Everybody else is coping with the things that, yes, I have to cope with, but I'm not managing quite as well. When are you going to change things, God? When are you going to make a difference? The answer that Habakkuk gets is a little bit surprising. The beginning in verse 5 says this: look at the nations and pay attention. You will be shocked and amazed, for I will do something in your lifetime that you will not believe, even though you are forewarned. The question I can hear ringing in your mind is, what did God do? Well, God engaged the Babylonians, the people who were the sworn enemy of Habakkuk and his country, to change things, to be those that bore witness to God. And so Habakkuk teaches us the lesson that sometimes God uses the things that we don't expect, and that sometimes if we listen and watch well, we find God in unexpected places. Sometimes that can be within ourselves, and we have to take a little bit of time to love ourselves, to search out God in our spirit and know that God is there. Sometimes that can be through the kindness of other people, and often during our relationships with us, we are touched by other people's kindness and generosity. And sometimes, as in this prophecy from Habakkuk, it is in the totally unexpected places, in the action of our enemies. And that is where this small book meets us. What in our life at this moment seems so big, so overbearing, so difficult to solve, that we find ourselves getting angry, depressed, or confused? Are these issues causing us to ask God the same questions Habakkuk was? And do we hear the answer that God gives Habakkuk? That if we dig down deep and look over the walls that we've built up, get to those things that we have brought that are bringing us pain or sleepless nights, and put them in front of God, that God will deal with them. In book 3 of Habakkuk, Habakkuk writes a prayer. He has spent the rest of the book in anguish with God. He has wrestled, he has shouted, he has demanded. And he starts chapter 3 by saying, I stand in awe of your deeds, Lord. Renew them in our day. In our time, make them known. In our wrath, remember mercy. So, where does that leave us? Maybe it's facing up to the inner conflict of all God's people, that in a world where things are not ideal, that we find the time to look with awe at the deeds of God and discern them. He recognises the inner conflict of God's people, who see a world in violent and chaotic turmoil and find it hard to discern the hand of God. And yet, God's people throughout time have known and are promised the presence of God's Spirit, who shows us the way of truth and love and grace, a grace that we must offer ourselves and one another. May that awe, may that discernment, and may that grace fill each of us today. Whatever the news is this evening, whatever the situation that we are dealing with, however we struggle with God, and may we continue to question God and hear the answers. Goodbye and God bless.